Hello everyone, I'm Mark Orlando, and thank you for coming to my talk, The Future of Security Automation is Collaborative. I'd like to start by thanking the staff and organizers of GrayHat Con and the Blue Team Village, including the review board. Really appreciate the opportunity to come on today and share this talk with you. A little bit about me. I have about 19 years of experience in security operations. Cyber defense is something that I'm very passionate about, I care deeply about, and I've spent pretty much my entire career in security working in, consulting, and trying to make what we as blue teamers do better, more effective, more impactful. I've built or led or worked in security operations teams at the Pentagon, the White House, the Department of Energy. I've led teams at managed security service providers, and I built one of the early managed detection and response offerings in our industry, which is basically threat hunting as a service. I helped to invent some custom analytics and automation technology that powered that service. And all those things were acquired by Raytheon, where I spent a few years as the Chief Technology Officer for Raytheon's cyber business. Today, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Bionic, which is a cyber defense company that we started to help security operations teams get more value out of what they're doing, be more effective, and find efficiencies through things like automation. In fact, the very same kind of automation that I'm going to talk about today. You can also find me on Twitter, writing about InfoSec and other things at Mark A. Orlando. So let's get into it. Why are we talking about security automation today? I wanted to give this talk because in my 19 years of experience working in security operations and some of the consulting that I do today, I too often see organizations making tremendous investments in cyber defense, but we aren't really driving up attacker costs, right, or lowering risk as much as we should be for the investments we're making and for the time that we're spending. I also think that many automation vendors that have promised solutions that are going to give cycles back to the analyst and save us time and make our teams more effective, I don't think that they've always delivered on those promises. So that's not to say that automation vendors are bad. My SOAR vendors out there, if you work at a SOAR company or you really love your SOAR platform, nothing but love for you. I'm not mad at you. But I do think that we've fallen short in how we think about security automation and how we apply it to defensive use cases. So I don't think robots are going to save us. I don't think we can script our way into replacing a human analyst or automate our way out of some of these very complicated defensive problems. But I do think automation can help us. I just think we need to reframe our thinking about security automation and how and where we apply it if we really want to have the impact that we're looking to have. Now, these 4 questions get to what I feel are some of the most common challenges in security analysis. If you're a SOC analyst, I'm sure that at some point in your career, you have wondered, how should I spend my time? On any given day, we've got emails to deal with, we have drive-by taskings, right? We have questions coming down from VIPs and management that we have to answer, right? We have to think about how we're deploying, how we're building out security defenses. We have to look at threat intelligence. And oh, by the way, if we get time, we have to actually look at some alerts and investigate them, figure out what's going on in our environment. When we do have time to focus on those things, triage is a big challenge. I have so many alerts to dig through on any given day in my SIM or my case management tool. Where do I go to first? How do I spend my time and prioritize alerts based on their impact to my organization? Right? We have to bring a lot of knowledge into that process to do that effectively and to do it in a way that's repeatable, right? Where everybody's doing it pretty consistently, right? That's a tough thing to do. One of the things that kept me up at night as an analyst, aside from, working night shifts, was what are the things that I don't know? What am I not aware of? And I don't just mean that from an intelligence perspective or a threat perspective, but what are the things that all these other really brilliant people that I'm working with or that I know out in the industry, right? What do they know? What institutional knowledge do they have? What experience are they bringing into their work that I don't have, right? And how can I get some of that so that I can be a more effective analyst? And then the final common challenge that I see, or the common problem that I see in security operations, is the syntax error. And I'm not talking about code. I'm talking about hitting a wall from an investigative perspective. Right? I don't have the information I need. I can't answer the questions I need to answer. And then just using that as an excuse to stop. I see this all the time. Okay? And it may not just mean stopping an investigation. Okay? But maybe it means equally harmful actions, like making a bunch of assumptions to fill in the gaps, prematurely closing out an investigation. Those things can be just as damaging as doing nothing or missing a threat to begin with. So how do we avoid those syntax errors? How can we leverage tribal knowledge within our teams more effectively, right, to avoid those hurdles, to break through those barriers, right, to investigate things to the fullest extent we can, and then make better, more informed decisions? Now, in the security automation space, right, as it pertains to SOC work, most of the solutions and the tools that we see fall into one of two categories, or maybe both. Either we're dealing with orchestration solutions, right, where we're going to define some sort of playbook or chain of actions, and then we're going to implement that playbook programmatically. Okay, very helpfully, some of the tools that are out there let us do that without writing much code, right, through a GUI and a series of pre-built connections or apps. But you can see I've got a really snarky comment here in my slide. All you have to do is just invest a little bit of time, just 20 hours a month to think of, design, create that playbook, manage it, make sure it works with your tools. Oh, by the way, make sure you're involving the analysts, taking those inputs, right? Just 20 hours. And in return, you can run those automated playbooks whenever that scenario pops up, and you can save up to 5 hours a month in time. Now, it may not be quite that bad. And again, maybe your SOAR tool is actually bringing some of the efficiencies that the vendor promises. But my point is, these things take a lot of management overhead to build and to maintain. It doesn't always save us time in the aggregate. The second scenario where we are most often applying automation in defense is in threat detection. This use case is a little bit older. It's been around for a little longer. Okay, and this is the, look, you're not going to be able to find these APTs by doing manual human analysis. You don't have the time or the expertise or the access to the right telemetry. But don't worry, we're going to find those super cool, right, state-sponsored, next-gen, AI-driven, zero-day exploits for you. Right? They're super complicated. You probably couldn't figure those out anyway. So we're going to take care of that for you. All right? Maybe vendors aren't quite so cavalier about it. But the point is, we've effectively tried to outsource threat detection to a product vendor. And while that can be helpful, okay, it doesn't always take a next-gen tool to identify even the most sophisticated threats. So consider this. Many of these products that tout automated response, automated analysis or investigation is really just robotic process automation with a better, flashier name. Robotic process automation has been around for a very long time and in a lot of different industries. It's not something that we in security have created. Okay? But we slap this label on it of orchestration, automation, response, and suddenly, we think we've gained some additional capabilities, when at the end of the day, again, it's really just about designing a series of steps, defining them in code, right? Being able to execute them with minimal or no human interaction. That's all we're doing. It's not new. Playbooks in many of these types of automation platforms have a one-to-one relationship with workflows. So you're maintaining a unique chain of actions, a unique playbook, for every alert or every alert type or threat type, right, or use case. And that one-to-one relationship means that your management overhead grows with the number of use cases or alerts or investigation playbooks, right, that you have. So while that can be very, very helpful, and I'm a big fan of automating the things that you can automate, it can also add a lot of management overhead, right? And it can be a disincentive if you have a very complex, right, very dynamic environment where you're doing a lot of different things, responding to a lot of different threats, and alerts have a lot of different workflows, right? Adding automation where you have this one-to-one relationship, it can make your life harder and not easier. The last point that I'll reiterate is that humans are still better than machines at detecting threats. The problem isn't that we don't know what attacks look like. Even if an attacker is using a 0-day and they're willing to burn a previously unknown exploit on your environment, you're that important. Or if they're getting a little stealthy or sophisticated about the technique they're using, at some point in the chain of events that will happen as part of that compromise or that attack, there will be something in there that you can use to identify it. Okay, we know what bad looks like. The challenge is sharing that information, sharing that knowledge and understanding across teams, and applying it at scale with all of the noise that we have to go through. Right? That's the challenge. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. All right? In Rocky IV, sure, Mr. T knocked out Rocky, right? And it's because he got complacent. Okay? All we need to do is go back to our roots, right? Remember the fundamentals. Train. Maybe jump around with Apollo Creed in the ocean a little bit. Okay? And we can come back better than ever, as long as we focus on the right things and the fundamentals. And if you came along with me on the Rocky III metaphor, I really appreciate it. Wasn't sure whether or not I wanted to include it. But the point is, we don't need next-gen tools to find all the things, okay? We are capable of doing that ourselves. We know what bad looks like. We just need to take what we already know, again, share it with our peers, and apply it at scale. And we can use technology to do this. There's a fantastic book, probably the best book on AI that I've read. It was published by Harvard Business Review Press. It's called Human and Machine Reimagining Work in the Age of AI. One of the concepts that this book describes is this concept of the missing middle, which is where humans and machines work together, collaborate, to amplify each other's strengths. So we're not trying to replace human ingenuity and creativity and decision-making with machines. Rather, we're trying to give humans superpowers, amplify what they can do, right, using assistive automation. We don't want to divide up the work. Okay, we want to help people scale. And while this book is not written specifically for cybersecurity or even technology, IT use cases, I found this lesson to be very relevant to the challenges that we face in security operations. Now, security operations is a team sport in most cases. Okay, some of you may be a one-person team, but for the most part, whether you're dealing with internal teammates or peers within our field, okay, we operate best, we're most successful when we collaborate. So, in my opinion, an overlooked missing middle in security is how we can collaborate better, right? How we can use these tools more effectively, how we can build more of our intelligence and our expertise into the tool set, right? There's a gap there that we need to fill. Another concept that I think is very relevant here is the concept of collaborative intelligence, or CQ. Okay, collaborative intelligence is what enables a team to be aware of gaps in their collective knowledge, right, and to fill them with individual knowledge and expertise. So that may sound familiar to those of you who work on SOC teams today, right? It's all about the knowledge of the team, how well that knowledge is shared, okay, how you can identify what one person knows that another person does not, okay, and that gets to the core of one of the often overlooked missing middles in security operations teams. Now let's think about those fundamentals. Okay, what makes for successful detection and response in a security operations team? Well, I think it comes down to these four things. First, it's not just about technical expertise and knowledge. It's also about the social element, how well we collaborate and communicate with each other. It comes down to the atmosphere of the team, the climate, right? The culture. Is it a very closed off, kind of siloed environment where we're all just focused on only the things that we are individually working on? Or is it an open learning environment, right? Where it's very easy for the team to identify, assimilate new information, and then act accordingly? We need behavioral influences, right? Direct and immediate feedback. Too often we get so caught up in the day-to-day of security operations, the operational tempo, right, that we have to keep in order to keep track of what we're doing and keep pace with everything we have to deal with. Okay, we forget about giving our teammates that direct, constructive feedback. Okay, but we need that in order to be effective and to learn. Right? Finally, analysts are empowered, right, to do what they do best. That is something that's universal in every successful team that I have ever seen. The analysts are empowered. They can make decisions. They can have an impact. They can think creatively, right? They can solve problems. They have the latitude, the ability, the support to do that. Right? There's some really great research out there on these things and more. There's a paper that was published as a result of research by George Mason University and DHS and Dartmouth and several other research groups that work together to study social maturity of incident response teams. I've included a link here. It talks about how these layer 8 challenges, right, collaboration, communication, social maturity, can make or break incident response teams. There's also another great paper out there published at usenix.org that talks about sources of burnout, right, issues, common challenges in incident response teams, right, the human capital element. And it talks a lot about burnout, what hampers teams, and how creative thinking, empowerment really powers the more successful teams and helps us avoid things like burnout. So these things, right, not the latest tool, not the right threat feed, okay, are what make or break successful incident response. So what does this mean for automation? Right, this is a talk on automation. Okay, it means a couple different things. One, if we want to talk about automated response, if we want to talk about highly automated cyber defense, security operations, we can't just be talking about RPA, about that robotic process automation. That might be a key element of our automation strategy, but it can't be our solution for automation. So we have to expand our definition of security automation, right, or automated response, to rethink that. And as part of that expansion, we have to focus on improving those layer 8 processes, collaboration, communications, right, improving collaborative intelligence, filling those missing middles, right, between the things that humans are doing and the things that our technology is doing for us or helping us do. So in this new approach, here's what that might look like. We need to identify the actions, decisions, that institutional knowledge and experience that we're looking for in a skilled analyst and a capable analyst. We want to distill those things into discrete actions, decisions, eventually automations that are relevant in multiple different scenarios, in different contexts. So for example, a capable analyst is going to apply knowledge of the environment, it's going to apply knowledge of the incident history, of a threat model, right? That's going to help them triage those alerts, right? It's going to help them decide what they need to do next during an investigation, right? What questions they need to answer. So we wanted to distill that context and be able to apply it in multiple different scenarios, different investigation types, different alerts, different threat types. That knowledge is going to be universal, right? We want to use those items, those discrete pieces of information, pieces of knowledge and experience, and we want to use that to bridge the gap between automated tasks and human judgment. We don't want to create a playbook and then walk away and say, okay, we're that much more effective now. Okay, that can be useful, but we need to use automation to drive how we're interacting with the technology on a daily basis. Okay, not just point in time, set it and forget it. And then finally, we can't automate what we can't anticipate. We are not always going to be able to predict all of the different things that have to happen during an investigation, all the steps we're going to take, all the questions that we want to answer. Okay, those might vary wildly depending on the type of incident that we're working. So designing more modular assistive automation, right, is probably going to be a better fit for lots of different SOC tasks, lots of different investigative tasks and incident types. So that's where our thinking needs to be on automation. So I wanted to talk about some use cases. These are kind of, let's call them use studies, case studies, use cases. So these are scenarios that are at least in part based on real world case studies where we've applied this kind of automation that I'm describing, right, with some success. But I want to talk about it in a general enough sense that it is relevant to you, right, that doesn't seem anecdotal. So we're going to talk about, based on experience, what are some good use cases for the kind of automation that I'm talking about? Automation that improves CQ, automation that helps guide how we use technology, not just constructs that are implemented in technology. So here's use case number one, alert triage and investigation. If you're an analyst that's not bogged down with emails and drive-by taskings, project work, user support, you're spending the bulk of your time figuring out which alerts, which events I need to focus on first, and what I need to do in order to validate those alerts, right? Follow them through to their logical conclusion, take action, right? Or improve my tools in some way, tune, right? Add data, improve my telemetry. Okay, that's the process that you're spending the bulk of your time on. That is the core function of a security analyst. So here's the scenario. We've got lots of different events coming in from lots of different sources. Some of them show up in email, some of them show up in a ticketing system, some of them are captured in a SIM. Okay, so there is a central repository for alerts, but not everything is coming in. Okay, it's a pretty common scenario in a lot of security operations teams. We have a lot of different contextual information. It is a very large enterprise. Again, this is based on a case study. In this scenario, we're dealing with a very large, diverse organization. Decentralized, right? Lots of different silos from an IT perspective. There are lots of social dynamics at play, lots of different VIPs, right? Highly visible individuals within the organization. So our priorities are not always set by our threat model. Sometimes they're driven by individuals, right? By those high value targets, those VIP users. And in looking at and modeling analyst behavior in this environment, in this organization, we saw evidence of, unsurprisingly, analysts being very subjective with how they were triaging alerts. So evidence of things like cherry picking, where analysts are gravitating towards the emails or the requests or the alerts in a SIM that they were most comfortable with, that they were most familiar with. Hey, I've seen this before, I know what it means, I know how to investigate it or what to do, or we have a playbook, right, for this one, so I'm going to go here first. Okay. We had inconsistent task assignment, inconsistent investigations. It was all very much based on individual experience, individual perceptions, right? And those skilled, experienced analysts out there know that that means individual bias being brought into those investigations. Okay, we're not doing things in a consistent way. My priority might not be your priority, might not be Sally's priority, So in this scenario, we started out by surveying the analysts, right? Trying to understand the source of their reference models, right? The source of their mental models that they were applying to decide what constitutes an important event, what constitutes a high value target, right? What they think the threat model of the organization is, how they were applying that in their analysis. And this is where the automation comes in. We want to start by modeling how analysts interact with the security tools. What event sources are they accessing most? What queries are they running? Right? How do those things translate to what is in the ticketing system? Okay, what threat types are we gravitating to? If we're doing data entry on closeout, right, what do those data points look like? Are we spending a lot of time chasing down events that ultimately are false positives or that are generated from overwhelmingly one source over another? We also want to look at the data sources that we have, whether that's in email or in the ticketing system or in the SIM, wherever that security data is. Okay, what kind of visibility do we have, and how does that line up with visibility into what we know are common tactics, techniques, procedures, common artifacts that we expect to see in an organization like this? And then we overlay that with the care-abouts, right? What's our threat model? What are we most worried about happening? And then out of those things, out of those care-abouts, what can we actually see given the data we have? Okay, so these are all really important data points because that visibility combined with our threat model, our care-abouts, right? We combine those to get our priorities. What are our defensive priorities? And what should the SOC analysts be looking at? If they're doing triage, where should they start? We look at that, compare it to how we modeled those analysts' behaviors. How far off are we in subjectively deciding based on who the analyst is, what day it is, what else is happening, how to spend our time? What's the delta there? And we want to correct that. We want to bring those behaviors and that baseline, how analysts are interacting with the data sources and the tools, in line with what those organizational priorities are, okay? Those should align pretty closely, right? So we can use automation, these micro automations, to prompt the analyst to prioritize things based on that threat model, okay? So we're adding another overlay. We're adding some additional contextual data to what's showing up in the emails, the ticketing system, the SIM, to prompt the analyst, hey, this is actually dealing with something that is more of a defensive priority than this other thing that you might be more comfortable with that you otherwise might go to first because you have seen it before. So we're doing some of that data enrichment that makes triage maybe a little bit cleaner, easier, more repeatable, and we're incorporating that analyst baseline behavior. So we're capturing not only what the more inexperienced analysts are doing, but what some of those more effective analysts are doing. Okay, and we're providing that context right there, in that console, right, in that alerting system or in that ticketing system to help provide some visual cues, some analytic cues to those users. And then whatever we can't close, whatever gaps we can't bridge by doing this, that's where some of your remedial training, security sprints, right, some of your non-technical corrective measures come in. In our second case study, I wanted to talk about playbooks again, okay, but not the kind of playbooks that we're talking about from a SOAR perspective, which, in my opinion, they can be overly rigid when used exclusively as a mechanism to guide an investigation. Okay, it's great to have those guardrails there and that repeatable process that's executed the same way every time. That can be a great use case for traditional SOAR platform. Okay, but what about the times when the questions that you have to ask or the actions you have to take are highly situational? So maybe a phishing attack requires this playbook, but a phishing attack targeting a VIP or a high value target, right? Maybe there are different questions you need to answer there, different paths you need to take, different actions you need to take, right? And sure, maybe 2 playbooks for phishing attacks is not that unruly to implement in a fully automated playbook or a mostly automated playbook. But what about insider threat, where there are any number of very, very different types of things that can happen, different alerts, different response or investigative actions? In those cases, and in this scenario that my team has run into, how complete that investigation is, how complete the remediation is very highly dependent on validation by other team members. So for example, taking our insider threat, right? I have an alert, a user is accessing something they don't normally access, right? A resource in the network. Okay, I might not have all the organizational information or the context that I need to decide whether or not that's bad. And in our case study here, analysts were very reliant on the knowledge of other analysts. Hey, have you seen this before? What do you usually do? Oh, do you know specific people or resources that you can go to get the information you need to validate this? Okay, highly reliant on input, right? That institutional knowledge, meaning we have a CQ gap. We have to raise that collaborative intelligence. Okay, so we're going to do that in this case, applying a new model for automation by looking at that initial data entry, right? That designation of what kind of incident it is, the fields that are completed, those initial case notes. Okay, we're going to index those as discrete data points. We're going to enrich those data points when we recognize a certain data type like user, right, machine, threat type, anything else that might help us better triage and better investigate that activity. And then again, we're going to prompt the analyst for whatever that situation specific task or question is. We're not going to try to game out the entire investigative workflow or predefine that. Okay, we still need to have the analyst be creative, get used to asking those investigative questions, get used to answering them, right? Whatever way is most efficient for them. But providing those prompts, applying the modular micro automation to try to capture that institutional knowledge, right, feed that into those analyst prompts and raise CQ, right, that makes for a better, more repeatable process, and it makes for a better trained analyst. So you might think that hey, that's great. I can do that in a playbook that takes user input. I can have custom dropdowns, right, where fields will be dynamically generated based on whatever threat type, or other selections I make. Sure, you can do that. But the question is, do we really want to raise that CQ? Do we want to make better analysts? Do we want to try to predict every eventuality, every type of investigation we're going to run into? Right? By applying this kind of assistive technology and this modular automation, right, we're making better analysts. We're actually starting to drive up that attacker cost because we have more people that can make decisions, that can follow investigations, that can identify and prioritize threats more effectively. Now, in conclusion, we often say, hey, there's no easy button in security, but then we turn around and we'll pay thousands of dollars for a prospective easy button. There's no easy button. Oh, there's AI. Okay, yeah, I'm going to do that. Yeah, sure, I need AI. That's easier, right? But we can't always rely on those AI-driven, voodoo magic, dump all your data in, and I'm going to give you all the interesting things, right? We can't always rely on pre-built playbooks or scripted actions, okay? Those things are great. I love automation, clearly. But we can't always rely on those things to make our team more effective. RPA, still very important and necessary. Again, we want to get those rote repetitive tasks off of our analyst plates, and there are lots of different ways that you can do that. But the best automation and the future of security automation is automation that enables people and computers to work more effectively together, right? Not trying to replace manual workflow, replace the analyst, right? But we want to give them superpowers. We want to enable them. And again, that comes with identifying information and institutional knowledge that makes for more effective analysts, and using automation to distill that and apply it inside of our workflows to what all of the other analysts are doing. So with that, I want to thank you all very much again for your time. Thanks again to Blue Team Village for having me. Let's keep in touch. Right? Feel free to give me a follow on Twitter, Mark A. Orlando, or you can email me at mark@bioniccyber.com, or you can check out our website where there is a blog where we post regularly on this and many other topics related to Blue Team and security operations. So thanks again. Enjoy the rest of the conference. I will be in the Discord chat if you want to talk about any of this stuff in real time, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.